Howdy, everyone. Robert Smith here, host of Support Your Local Podcast. Now that we're in our hiatus, I've been getting some questions from some of our listeners on now that our first season is over, what's next? If you are keeping track of us on social media, you'll have already seen the announcement I made a while ago, roughly all around halfway through the season. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, and that's actually what we're in right now. So if you've been expecting a new episode to drop every Sunday, that's why we haven't had anything kind of off and on for the past month or so. But after we are done, we are going to come back with our second season, and we'll be taking a look on at Sam Raimi's The Quick and the Dead. Western-ish, more modern. Definitely a Sam Raimi movie for anybody that's seen it, but has an awesome cast. I mean, we're talking Leonardo DiCaprio, Sharon Stone, Gene Hackman, Russell Crowe. Pretty much every character actor you could possibly imagine is in this movie. So definitely stay tuned for that. We're super excited. But I wanted to take a moment during our hiatus and just kind of answer a question that I've been getting off and on now that people know that I'm in the podcasting thing. And that is, how do you start a podcast? And it's a question that I asked myself. It's a question that I asked a lot of people that I listened to in the podcasting world on how exactly do you get started in this world? And first and foremost, the two things that you absolutely have to have is an idea and some time. What do you truly enjoy doing? What's a topic that you can talk about for hours on end? When you're with your friends, what do you guys just kind of, uh, you know, bullshit around about? And the reason that this is important is once you jump in and actually start creating content, you're going to run the very real risk of running out of steam for your topic. No matter how much you think that you, you know or you have in as ammo for conversations, believe me, it's not going to be enough. You definitely want to get more and more of it. So just make sure that whatever it is that you're talking about, it's something that you're passionate about. It's something that you're truly interested in talking about for long, extended periods of time. And full disclosure, open kimono. I almost made this mistake myself when I chose to start with support your local sheriff. It was a twofold decision, admittedly. One, it was currently on Pluto TV, so I had been watching it pretty regularly for about a month and noticed some things while I was watching it that I'd love to talk about. It was already a movie that I had seen a million times before as a kid. Hadn't watched it in probably 10, 15 years before I did on this one, but it was something that was always like, oh, hey, I remember that movie. I watched it a lot when it was on Pluto, kind of on repeat, and that kind of tickled my fancy. But it was a movie that I had already seen so many times with my dad growing up. Secondly, I shamelessly had the idea to call my podcast Support Your Local Podcast for years now. I hadn't actually thought of doing one of the two movies, Support Your Local Sheriff and Support Your Local Gunfighter. I had actually had the idea for Support Your Local Podcast just as a catchy name for something uh, without actually thinking about the movies. I mean, granted, it came from the movies. That's what I was ripping it from. But I didn't necessarily mean for the podcast to go over those two movies. Just a happy coincidence, but I just thought it had a nice built-in name for a show, and it was something that could kind of transcend those two movies. Why wouldn't you support your local podcast? Hi, I'm Robert. If you're listening to this, you probably lived in the places I lived. You're probably a friend or a family. Hi, guys. Miss you. Love you. So by listening to this, you're supporting your local podcast, and I thought that would be kind of a cool concept. And this is what led me to almost fall into the trap I talked about a minute ago and making sure that you have enough to go around in regards to the show that you're covering. My admitted mistake, if it was one to be made, and I do think it was probably not choosing a movie that is mainstream enough. My audience figures will attest to that. No offense. I love you all for listening. Thank you. So yeah, people like me who grew up with a parent who loved westerns and loved specifically TBS westerns in particular, the ones that came on Saturdays between, right before or between Atlanta Braves baseball and wrestling on TBS. You probably have seen or are at least aware of this movie, but let's be realistic. It is a 1969 movie. It's a western. It's a comedy western that's not Blazing Saddles. So I am I was probably speaking to a fringe of a niche. So not even a niche audience. I was probably speaking to a fringe of a niche audience at my best. So there was only so much content I was going to be able to create for this show that would be interesting or relevant to a 2022 audience. I knew that kind of going in. It was kind of a niche movie. Doing the remember the names was fun. I love doing it. I love doing deep dives into that stuff. But even once you get out of the James Garner, Walter Brennan field of things, a lot of these actors, unless you grew up watching 60s and 70s television, you probably didn't know who these people were. And let's be honest, if you're under 30, you may not have even known who James Garner was. So it was a risk, but it was one that I definitely wanted to take and get my feet wet, getting a podcast out there. Another part of that mistake, it comes from a personal habit of mine. And for as long as I've been writing, whether it was stories, scripts, whatever it may be, I have this really bad habit of focusing on one or two kind of key moments and not wanting to spend enough time and energy creating the pieces around those key points. I'm so focused on the key points that I'm rushing through writing the other parts. And this is true when it comes to podcasting, especially when you're breaking down things in a movie by minutes format like we do. The first couple chapters were fine. There feels like there's a lot of information to give and a little trivia, here and there, etc. However, as you get through a few and you start hitting some slow moments in the movie, you will very, very quickly begin to struggle getting enough out there to make the episode worth it. Look at a lot of my fellow Movies by Minutes podcast, and let's be real, my own. I'm by no means throwing them under the bus. It's something that I fell victim to myself. So don't think that I'm not blaming myself. But so many of them have these first episodes that they're over an hour. Then as it goes along, the episodes begin to get shorter and shorter, and there's a reason for that. Again, this happened to me as well. So for those that don't know, this whole idea started back in December, beginning of January. I had COVID. And while I was stuck in bed, not being able to do anything, I sat there and I went chapter by chapter through the movie, Support Your Local Sheriff, and I wrote my notes as I went along. And when I went back through and started making episodes, I found out real quick that my notes kind of went from over a page per episode to barely over a paragraph. And even the ending of the movie where all the action is, it's simple. I was running out of steam as I wrote. There wasn't a lot that I was doing. I was in such a rush to get it done that I wasn't taking the time to devote the time and energy to each individual chapter as its own kind of entity. So definitely make sure when you're writing your stuff and getting ready for recording that you don't fall into that pitfall like I did. If you want to cover something, make sure you have enough to cover the entirety of it. Then when you think you have enough, get some more. And trust me, you can never have too much. You're not going to leave notes on the table, I promise. So now if you have your subject matter, so you know what you're going to make your podcast about, let's talk some tech. This was where it was kind of daunting to me. I thought that it was going to take a lot of time and money and energy and money and things that I didn't have, like money, to make this happen. And the facts are, you can spend as much as you want to start your podcast, no doubt. There's microphones, screens, mixing boards, web hosting. There are a ton of things you could do and buy, or you can go the quick and simple route like I did, and I'll leave it up to you on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it ended up okay. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a sound engineer. My thing may not sound as clean and pristine as it could, but I think it sounds okay. Considering what I did and the lack of experience I have, I'll live with that. Starting out with microphones, I did buy an inexpensive one from Walmart. I want to say it was around 30 bucks. It's right here. It was a JLab microphone. And the reason that I can just kind of grab it and take a look at it right now is because it's been sitting on the shelf pretty much ever since I bought it. I did use it. I used it once, and through no fault of the microphone, I think it did just fine. I just didn't use it again. And the reason was when I was recording with it, I also used the voice memo app on my iPhone to record a backup of it. And what I found was that there wasn't a big noticeable difference between the audio I was getting from the microphone and what I was getting from the iPhone. So I just used the iPhone from there. And for those that went back to the episodes, I did record quite a few of them when I was on a vacation with my family from Ohio. I was on vacation with them out in North Carolina. And I was literally just sitting in a parking lot of a Lowe's in my van with my phone just recording. And that was kind of my test to see what the sound difference was going to be, and I think it came out just fine. So I've been using my iPhone ever since. It's what I'm actually using right now. I'm walking around my bedroom holding my iPhone. For a computer, again, you can spend the money and get a mixer and soundboard and all that. I didn't. However, I just used my regular day-to-day laptop. I had originally plugged the mic into it that one time I used it, but after that, I just emailed myself the voice memo from my phone, and then just opened it up in my computer and worked with it from there. Once it was on the computer, I did need something to tinker with the audio. After all, there are a lot, and I mean a lot of ums and screw ups to edit out. For every that you hear in these podcasts that slip by, or I was just too tired of deleting them that I let it go. Trust me, there is. I just did another one. There is probably 100 to 150 that I do edit out. So it's a bad habit. It's one that even comes from my public speaking days. I know it. I accept it. So not to sound like a broken record, but you can spend a lot of money on a fancy editing tool, or you can just download Audacity. That's Audacity, and it's absolutely free. When I posted in the Movies by Minutes group asking what everybody used, this was the most consistent answer that I got. And again, it's free. You just download it, and there are tons of tutorials out there for how to use it. But I found it pretty intuitive, even without those. I had already done really a ton of editing things with Camtasia, Camtasia. More on that later. But I was using Camtasia a lot when working on commercials and videos for my RTS bowling stuff and my training stuff for my day-to-day job. So the interface was something pretty familiar to me. Again, I think it's a little bit intuitive, but if not, lots and lots of help out there on the internet to kind of walk you through. So I mentioned that I'd speak a little bit later on Camtasia. I also used that. Now, full disclosure, I already owned this, so it technically didn't cost me anything for the podcast. However, I do own the license for it, which is around a couple $100. Now that said, I only use Camtasia for a couple things, and I'm sure there's a way to do it in Audacity or another free editor. That was to add the what I use the Camtasia for, it was mainly to add the video element to my podcast for my YouTube channel. Support your local podcast. Check us out. I also use it to compile the pieces of my show. So, for example, with Support Your Local Sheriff, and here's a little peek behind the curtain to see how the fudge is made. If you couldn't tell, I have pre-recorded bits. And for example, my sound cues, like the opening music, the sarsaparilla bit, stuck your finger in the end of your what, things like that. So I would use Camtasia to cut those into my main recording. And again, I'm sure there's a way to compile things in a free way with another app, but have not explored that because I had the familiarity and the availability of Camtasia. So if that's a cheat, I'm sorry. But if you're into video editing and things like that, I do highly recommend them. That's not a paid spot. I've just been using them for almost a decade now. Back when I was working at Safi, I discovered that. Thank you, Linda, if you're listening. You're the one that turned me on to that. But if you have a way, if you know of a way to do this in Audacity or any other type of free editing software, please hit us up on our social media sites with a comment so you can help out your fellow listeners to get started. You know, maybe you'll be the person that helps, open the door for the next big podcast idea. Once I have all the editing done, then I have a full episode ready to go and I export it. Now, for me, I go to my provider, which is Anchor, just like a ship's anchor, Anchor, and that is part of Spotify. I created a free account with them, and I upload my episodes into it. And then on Anchor, they have a great little tool that helps walk you through getting your podcast out there on all the other major podcatchers. So Apple, Google, Overcast, Stitcher, pretty much everywhere. If it's a podcatcher that you use, you can probably get your link up through Anchor onto them. And this too is free. It only takes a little bit of time on your part getting accounts created and links to your show in there. Again, very intuitive, but if not, there are tutorials on how to kind of do those step by step. And really, that's it. For as daunting as I thought the prospect of starting a podcast would be, when it came down to it, it truly was a lot simpler than I imagined. The big hurdle, as I mentioned earlier, was actually pulling the trigger on doing it. Once the pieces were in place, it really was just a lot of fun. I have a blast doing this. I look forward to doing this every time. Hopefully you guys get some entertainment out of it. If not, I do. This is very much an outlet for me and my creativity. So I appreciate the opportunity. I am definitely looking forward to future seasons, especially the aspect of having guests. I know and have been pretty open that I know one of my weaknesses of that first season is that it's too scripted. I apologize. It's the only way I know how. I'm not as good with the improv side of things as I probably could be when I'm by myself. Hopefully by having some guests and bouncing things off of them, we can get a little bit off of that. But I am trying to work around that a little bit more, and I really do think that back and forth will do wonders to help that. I have already recorded some episodes with a friend of the show, Brian Boucher, and from Top Gun Minute. Definitely check him out. He is currently working on another movie. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that yet, but I will be guest hosting on that one as well. But keep your ears to the ground for him. He always has a great show. But with these guests and with the new format and the availability of spoilers, I get to use a potty mouth a little bit in this movie. So it is a rated R movie. So for those of you that are virgin as the undriven snow, I apologize. I am going to use a few choice words throughout this season. Please forgive me. But I am excited to see what you guys think. But anyways, I just wanted to take a moment and speak with you guys. I miss you already, not throwing something out there every week. I'm excited to get back up and running. I wanted to make this in hopes that if there's even one of you that have thought about making a podcast, but have the same reservations that I had, that you can see that literally anybody can do it. I'm telling you right now, if I can make a podcast, you can make a podcast. I already had a friend of mine reach out to me in regards to starting his own. Excuse me. Hopefully he does that. He's going to be a guest on this season, so keep an ear out, see if you can figure out who that is. But yeah, it really is that simple. It was really great to have him reach out and just kind of get advice and for me to be able to basically tell him what I'm telling you now. It's quick and painless. Just put a little time and effort into it. That's all it takes. But if you are thinking about it, please, 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 don't be scared. Don't wait for the perfect moment. I want you to live for today in regards to that. Our tomorrows are not guaranteed. I think it's no secret. Anybody that's listened to any of my episodes knows all this happened because of what happened to my dad. And I decided that I was not going to wait and do something that if I have an idea to do something and it only costs me time, then I'm going to do it. So hopefully you do too. So live for today and create something and put it out into the world. I want you to make it exist. Once it does, nobody can take that away from you, ever. So whether it is the best thing in the world or only your mama listens to it, which, hey, my mom doesn't even listen to my stuff. She can't, she doesn't know how to do the podcast thing, which is cool. I'm getting her on there. As soon as we figure that out, then she's going to listen. But regardless, you can call yourself a podcaster. You know, not a lot of people listen to this one. That's fine. I'm trying to work on that. I'm trying to make it bigger and better. I appreciate those that have taken the time to listen to it. But at the end of the day, I can say that I am a podcaster. It exists. And now you can too. Hopefully this helps you out. So until next time, as always, I thank you for your time. And remember, support your local podcast.